Hello, this is Mr. Buffington, and we are going to look at a Common Core anchor where we're asked to describe functions or to write a function from a description. We'll look at some graphs and some word problems and try and describe some functions. It's kind of a challenging thing to do, so let's get started. First off, we are going to look at this graph and try to describe it. Describe some of the characteristics of it. What would you say when you're looking at this graph? The function is the red line, the curved red line. Maybe you'd say it's curved. I would maybe start by saying the graph increases slowly at first, then it increases more quickly. That's called, this type of curve is often called an exponential curve, where it starts off slow and then it picks up pace. The graph starts at the origin, 0, 0. Might be good to say where it goes from. And the graph only measures x from 1 to 4. Okay, so our x values only go between those 2 points. So that might be some of the descriptions of this graph. Let's look at another one. From this graph, the green lines here, the green line segments that form that function, what are some of the things you can conclude by looking at this graph? Perhaps you notice that the graph increases quickly from x equals 0 to x equals 1. Right there, it has a slope of 4. It's got a really steep slope. Then also the graph starts at the origin, 0, 0. That's something that was consistent with the previous graph. It's about the only thing that was consistent with the previous graph. The graph has a 0 slope from x equals 1 to x equals 3. And then it has a slope almost equal to 1 after that point, and then it stops right before the number 5, x equals 5. So there's some things that you can describe about this graph just by looking at it, looking at the graph and then describing the parts of it. Let's look at one more graph and we're going to try and describe what we see in this graph. Looking at this graph, the orange-yellow colored lines there may be some things that you notice about this graph. If you've ever worked with absolute values, this is the graph of the function of the absolute value of x. Okay, in other words, all y values are positive. So all of the output values will be positive. All the numbers will be in quadrant 1 and 2. Okay, that's important to notice there. The graph passes through the origin. All right, it kind of has a vertex right at the origin, 0, 0. The graph has a line of symmetry on the y-axis. All right, so there's a lot of things we can notice about this. In quadrant 1, the slope is 1. In quadrant 2, the slope is -1. So I'll just show you quadrant 1 is in this section. It has a slope of 1. In quadrant 2 over here, it has a slope of -1. All right, those are some observations we can make from graphs. So if we're given a graph and asked to describe the graph of a function, we need to describe certain things: the rate of change, the slope, the gradual change in slope, like in the first one, how it started off slow and increased, what points it passes through. If you notice certain points that it passes through, is it linear or nonlinear? This one here, it's linear in each part, but it's not a linear graph overall. So we have some parts there. In the second part of this, what we're going to do is we're going to be given a description and asked to write a function based on that description. Oftentimes, this would be called writing a function equation from a word problem. Let's take a look. Jim eats 50 chocolates per night. Write a function to represent Jim's unhealthy addiction. So first off, we have to know that the total number of chocolates we're going to represent as the function of x. That's the total number of chocolates. When x is the number of nights Jim is eating these chocolates, so our function would be equal to 50 times x. Whatever our function is, when the day increases, the number of chocolates he eats will increase. Now we could take this and turn it into a graph as well. Right now we're just going from description to a function. So this is how we would write a function based on the word problem that we have there. Let's look at another one. Jim gets up super early to exercise for 30 minutes each morning. Write a function to represent Jim's unhealthy addiction. Notice the happy face there on this one. So we're going to say the total time he spent exercising in minutes is the function of x. The days spent exercising is x. And our function would be 30 times x. 30 minutes per day. That's the number of minutes that he's spending exercising. Very similar to the previous one, writing a function based on a description or verbal description or a word format or a word problem that we have here. So our Common Core Anchor and PA eligible content, you'll see, has a lot of describing qualitative functional relationships between quantities and also being able to sketch or determine a graph based on a function that has been described verbally or written. Hope that lesson was helpful for you. Have a wonderful day.